Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America online, thisweekinamerica.us. Thomas Miller has been a student of Unarius since he was 14 years old at that time, meeting Ernest L. Norman, the founder and teacher of Unarius. Tom has given many lectures on the Unarius principles for over 56 years of study, a frequent media guest. He's been featured in a documentary film. He's written several books about Unarius principles, including a book of verse, The Epic, and a series of lectures, which he published in the book The Keys to the Universe. Tom maintains a website, unariansunited.com. Features Dr. Norman's teachings as well as student testimonials and discussions. With a degree in science and accounting, Tom is the owner of a tax accounting firm in Portland, Oregon, a frequent guest on the program and back with us today. Tom Miller. Tom, welcome back to the show. It is always a pleasure to have you with us.
Well, hi, Rick. It's very nice to be with you today.
We have listener questions, and we encourage you to do that by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You can listen and watch the programs we've done with Tom, and then you can submit questions, and we share those with Tom, and we tackle them on the program. We'll get to some of those today. We're going to start off by talking about personal development by using energy principles. And I've been looking forward to talking about this for the last week when you told us we were going to start the program with that topic. Explain exactly how that works and how we can benefit from this.
Well, Rick, today I would like to speak about our personal relationship to the great infinite intelligence and how this relationship works from the Unarian perspective. The image you see now is the teacher and moderator, Dr. Norman, who brought these works into this world about 70 years ago. Now, to do this, we must hearken back to the fundamental or the base principles that we've talked about earlier, such as energy and how it works in our lives, frequency relationship, harmonic regeneration and attunement, cyclic interplay or the life cycle, and evolution, expressed generally in the concept of reincarnation or the transmigration of the soul. Charles Darwin, about 170 years ago, explored the idea of evolution, and in his works Origin of the Species brought forward the concept of the transmigration or the transference of energy of the evolution of the species, where they change dynamically from one incarnation to the next. And so Darwin had a great discovery. He saw the world changing dynamically. However, he was, like most scientists, still locked into the idea of the physical world as being the sole place of life. However, our concepts in Unarius expands that into the spiritual realm also. Now, it is not separate. It is actually an oscillation, or it is a combination or a harmony of one aspect of or two aspects of the same energy patterns. We call it oscillation. We call that a polarity patterns. When we speak of the principles, we're focusing on how the infinite recreates itself in everything. Now, first of all, everything is energy. That is so important concept. Now, energy itself is a force. Now, behind a force must be another force generating it.
Okay.
We say that force behind what we see about us is the fourth dimensional energy patterns, which are demodulating themselves and appearing itself into this dimension. The scientists have said that most scientists say that this world is actually an illusion. If we talk about how they're discovering the energy patterns out there in the universe, and microscopically in quantum mechanics, they're finding the forces within the atom, and they're not finding any particular particle, except they're finding bundles of energy, which they call particles, but are not truly solid. but they are a set of forces, a packet of forces, like a photon. They do understand photon energies as being a packet of energy acting like a particle sometimes, and then other times acting like a wave. Now, this is done through an oscillating movement from positive to negative, creating a polarity. Energy is dynamic, and that's a very important word, dynamic, and constantly changing through this polarity exchange. One concept we can bring into the polarity concept is the Bayun concept, or people call soulmate situations, where two people are actually the opposites, and they are so combined and they are so compatible that they actually act like one person.
Okay. Yep.
And so
Yep.
most people are out there looking for their Bayun or their soulmate, that their life will be perfected when they find this soulmate. However, many times what we're really doing is finding energies from our past, relationships from our past, and they're called karmic situations, and there's much conflict there. In the idea of the Bayun concept, we can extrapolate out into the idea of atomic entanglement, whereas you can have two atoms, one atom in one part of the universe and another atom in another part of the universe. It doesn't matter about the space in between, but they're what they call entangled. So if one atom generates an upspin or a downspin, the other one will actually take on the opposite to the one that has made the change. And so they are compatible or at one with each other, and it doesn't matter. They could be universes apart. Now, Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. Now, he did not want to believe that because he said, God doesn't act that way.
Yes.
And so the physics did not speak well in Einstein's mind. However, in later experiments, they've actually proved this principle to be effective and real, that these two atoms are acting like bayuns or polarities, or they're acting as one unit. This is the concept with the people, that they also have the opposite in this universe, and they have the opposite side of themselves. Now, they could be at any points of the universe and in any dimension. One can be incarnated on some earth world like this one, and the other one would be in the spirit world. And usually, when we talk about that concept, it's better actually for one to be on the earth plane, the other one in the spirit, because they could help each other. Whereas if they get together in the physical world, they are generating karma within themselves to be worked out later, just like any normal energy pattern in this world.
Right.
Now, the mind, talking about the mind, is our sixth sense and resides in the fourth dimension. And the brain is only the facilitator to exchange energy expressions and close the loop to attain consciousness or awareness. A lot of times, let's just look at some of this. This is a vortexual energy pattern, which we describe a lot of times is acting in the fourth dimension, where they're totally cycler, where time and space are combined. In the third dimension, time and space are separated out. However, the scientist is saying that space is expanding. Well, how can space expand when time itself is a universal unit? So when they say space is expanding, well, in our concept, that is very, very true, because space itself is a subanomaly or a subharmonic of the interactions of the mass formations within the universe. And so this is these energy patterns that we can be visualizing from the fourth dimensional point of view. Now, everything, as we said, is energy. If we look at this pattern of the sun, we can see uh, all of these photons. These are photons, light photons that we're looking at right now.
Let me just mention
However,
that Tom is referring to video. The video version of this is available on YouTube, our YouTube channel. If you go to thisweekinamerica.us, you'll be able to watch the video as we're talking here. And if you go to Tom's website, unariansunited.com, you also will be able to see the video. Some great video that goes along and makes what Tom is talking about all that more relatable, understandable. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted people
that's
to
okay.
realize when you're talking video that you can follow that very easily by going back and looking at either our website or at Tom's website. So pick us up if you will.
Yeah, we're going to use some of these images here to describe these concepts. Now, if we're looking at the sun, we can see this dynamic energy pattern being generated from the surface of the sun. Actually, what we're looking at is the corona of the sun. We're not looking at the interior part where all of this action is generating these photons on the surface. But you can see, though, the pattern in the middle where the explosions or emissions are actually following, it looks like electromagnetic lines of force, which is really true. These lines of force are the binding forces within the atomic structures that these highly charged atoms are following, and so indicates that we not only have a visible spectrum, but we've got an electromagnetic spectrum, which is following not only in the sun, but in every atom. Every atom. Now, if we think about that, the consequences that our body has trillions and trillions of atoms that are acting like this at a microscopic level. They are generating these energy patterns. Now, where do these energy patterns come from? They come from the fourth dimension. And when we talk about the world being a hologram or an illusion, the idea is that the illusion is that everything is dynamically interacting with all other energy patterns, and we have what we call persistence. Now, the persistence is the energy that's coming from the fourth dimension and is expressing itself on a time basis, which is could be very short periods of time when these energy patterns we're discussing. And when we talk, every one of these energy patterns have these what we call sine waves, and you can see this image showing the harmonics that are involved in every sine wave. Now, this is the regenerative factor of energy itself, and so when we talk about that idea of the illusion and persistence, energy is generated in pulses, and those pulses can be expressed either sinusoidal, which are electromagnetic or wave structures, but they can also combine together to act like particles, which when we talk about light, we talk about photons. Now, when you look at the atom, you look at all of these energies circling a particular center pattern. The center pattern can be the same thing as the sun we just looked at. And the outside patterns are, we might say, like the planets revolving around. However, this idea is an old idea and it's called classical mechanics, where you have electrons revolving around a central nucleus. But what they're finding out is when they explode two atoms together, you can see that there is no particles. What there are force fields taking various electromagnetic circular patterns, and that's what the atom is really made up of. They're finding is just simply forces, not simply forces, but forces that are expressing themselves within the atom and then released when they explode these atoms. And that's where they get the atomic energy. And where that energy is coming from is the pulses from the vortexes. And the reason we call vortexes is because all energy is in the fourth dimension is cyclic in nature and contains all of the information and the frequency relationships, harmonic attunements within that vortex. And so as it revolves around, it pulses down into the third dimension, and then we get these energy patterns in this third dimension. And yet the reality is a short persistence, and these pulses are maintained from the fourth dimension. Now, the reason I'm bringing all of that up is, okay, what is that? How does that affect me as a person? Well, if we go back and we think about these energy patterns in the fourth dimension, we're talking about our own spiritual body, our own psychic structures, energy patterns that have all of the intelligences from all of our past. And so this is we are actually a spiritual being regenerating these energy patterns in our psychic anatomy into the physical world. You can see that from these images that there's a tremendous radiating force field from our own physical body.
Yes.
And we have what they call the chakras, images that we call energy centers that are maintaining our physical structures and our energy condition into this dimension. However, we're getting all of our information, intelligence, and energy from this psychic anatomy. We keep going back to that, but this is what the difference between Unarian concepts are and, let's say, the religionist concept, where the person is only a reciprocant of some other outside God force. Whereas if you really look at these energy patterns, we say that these energy patterns are the God force. It's not within the God force. It is the energy of the God itself. Is the infinite intelligence operating within each of us and all forms of life. And this is an image where we're showing that there is a communication between people, all people, and are formed in energy waveforms. And we have what we call mental telepathy, psychokinesis, telekinesis, and all of the things which are coming from the theosophical understandings.
That's a great picture because that really brings that point home, doesn't it?
Yeah, a century and a half ago, they were saying that we are all really one. We are communicating with each other through these energy patterns. And you can see these two people don't have to say a word to each other.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, they're communicating these energy patterns from a fourth dimensional point of view, or the mind. Now, a lot of times the scientists will say, okay, you had this experience, but it's only your imagination. It's only your hallucination. Or they use these terminologies to say, well, it's not real. It's not real. The only thing that's real is your conscious mind and what you see in front of you and all of the atomic structures that make up the physical world, which is only really a very, very small part of who we are. It's like an iceberg. We only see the surface of the iceberg, but what's underneath is a tremendous amount of energy of who we are and what we're doing and how we operate. But we also we look out onto the surface of the ocean, and this is our third dimension. We only see the surface of the third dimension. And so we don't see what's underneath all of these energies, and this is what Unarius is attempting to teach us and to help us understand these new concepts, which are really not new. It's how we have operated ever since we began to be an amoeba in our evolutionary process. And so this is the infinite operating at all times.
I would
And you
encourage
can,
people to look at the video because it really brings home exactly what Thomas is talking about. And again, his website is unariansunited.com. You'll find information there on what Tom is talking about. And the video, I think he's got some connections there as well. And of course, you can find it at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. So back to the pictures because the pictures really do an excellent job visually of telling the story.
yeah, now here we have a dynamic view of the oscillation from the psychic anatomy into the physical world. You can see all these sparks coming out and these radiations coming out. These are all the intelligent waveforms from experiences of our past. And so when we talk about that, this is a schematic that we've kind of generated showing how this energy operates and how it communicates within itself as a closed loop condition. Let's just say we're looking at a chair, any kind of chair, it doesn't matter. And these light waves are going into our eyes, being translated by the rods and cones of our eyes into electrical impulses and are sent to the back of the brain or the occipital lobe. And there we have images of that chair, and it goes into the hypothalamus, which goes down into the center of the brain, and is stepped up. It is translated into a higher frequency, and then it's sent to what we have over here on the left as a representation of our psychic anatomy into three divisions. One is the subconscious, which is all of the energies we've experienced since our birth. And this is all of the images we've seen of all the chairs in this lifetime. And then whatever happened with those chairs. We were made to sit in a particular chair, or maybe we sat on the chair and it fell down or broke.
Yes.
So we remember all of those things from the subconscious point of view. And that relates here, but then it also goes into what we call the mental consciousness, which is all the experiences of that chair from our past lives. Now, you can say, the electric chair, the torture chamber chair, the throne chair, so we are contacting all of those types of images about that chair. Then we get to superconsciousness, actually coming down into the mental consciousness and interacting with those ideas of that chair. And this chair is only some kind of an image because we're talking about any image, anything that we see and interact with. And so that the superconsciousness contains the perfect idea of a chair. And it comes down into the mental consciousness, oscillates with all of those negative and positive energies of the chair, combining where the subconscious oscillates up into the mental consciousness. So what we have is a triad. We've got these energies beating together and generating what we call harmonics and subharmonics. Now, once we get that going, then it reverses. The energy comes back down into the brain, oscillates back into other neurons that are made to fire because of the energy coming from the psychic anatomy. And then we have what we call a reaction to the chair. We love it, we hate it, it doesn't mean too much to us or whatever. But this is how the psychic body and the mind body or the physical body interact with ourselves. It's a closed loop condition, and I hope this image helps.
It does. It really graphically tells us exactly what you're talking about. That's fascinating how that works.
So if we look at it, you can see the energy going back and forth, and oscillating these things, you see,
yes,
and making it possible. Now, the scientists have mapped the brain. They know basically where the audio goes into the brain, or the occipital lobe, which is the back of the brain, which is an interesting place to put the visual images and in the brain, at the back of the brain. I guess there wasn't any more room. So anyway, the central brain stem is the controlling is the knob that you use to alter these attunements from our past. And so you can see as we go about our daily life, this action is taking place every second, every moment of our lives, going back and forth, you see. And it's generating what we call consciousness. Now, that consciousness can be positive or negative according to how our past, in this lifetime and the past lifetimes, were concerned, whether we had good experiences or bad experiences, or has very little meaning to us. So we can look around our world, we can look within our relationships with other people, and we can see this energy going back and forth within our consciousness, making that attunement. So that's how we feel. We have moods every day, and those moods are brought on by what we're intercepting in our consciousness in our daily life. And so, we can do all kinds of mind experiments to prove this principle. So you can just sit on your couch and you just let your mind wander. You don't think of anything in particular, and you can see, analyze that your mind wanders from one dimension, one understanding, one thought pattern to another. And you can start out with a story in your mind thinking about your brother and then how you went swimming when you were 12, and by the time you get done 20 minutes later, you're actually thinking about world conditions.
Okay.
So
Yep.
why is that so? It's because the brain is doing and being generated into this oscillation procedure or process, and this is why we have consciousness, and this is why we react to certain things, be either positively or negatively in our lives. Now, this is how the scientist looks at it when they say, okay, and the eye is bringing in light waves. And incidentally, there is no real color. It's all frequency related. We have a very narrow spectrum of energy we call light, which is generated white light. But then within that, there's all kinds of gradations of frequency. Now, the eye translates those frequencies into color patterns from an evolutionary process when we first started, understanding or visualizing these things. And so the colors are actually goes into the brain from the conversion process of light into electrical impulses. So the brain that receives these things, translates them, and there is no place in the brain where it's stored. The brain is not a storing device. A lot of scientists think, well, the brain that's it, that's all there is, and there should be some place in the brain where these things are stored, called memory or whatever.
Exactly, yes.
Which is not true. What's stored, these energies are really in the psychic anatomy. They are in the fourth dimension. They are stored within our soul, not in the physical dimension. Because remember, we were talking about that all energy in this dimension is ephemeral. It's very short-lived. It's generated in pulses, and therefore all of that information that are on those pulses are coming from another dimension or another force pattern, which are in these other or higher dimensions, or unseen dimensions. But then anyway, the brain impulses a little bit to the right there, it shows these neurons. Now these neurons are specifically generated through that evolutionary process to step up those frequencies, and then we get to the right, extreme right, we have what we call conscious percept, which is this is the closed circuit condition we described earlier in this way. You see, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And
Yes.
so instead of a chair, we can say, okay, that's a dog. Now, what relationship did we have in our past with a dog, either in this life or in other lifetimes? Always considering and realizing that everything that we've done and experienced in this life is an update, is a regeneration of our entire past. Now, if we think about the past histories, we can understand many of our reactions because uh, we are insecure with the infinite because we don't understand the infinite intelligence within us, totally, because that's totally impossible to understand and conceive an infinite nature of anything because it is endless and beginningless. Right now, we have a very, very finite mind. And so, therefore, we are conceiving the infinite in a insecure position because of ignorance. And so we are attempting all the time to what Darwin called survival of the fittest, where we have always guilt complexes, insecurities, and ideas that we needed to survive. And therefore, if you just put yourself in some past lifetime where you were a courtesan in the court of some king. Well, the king at that time could say off with his head and you were a done deal. There was no law process there. And so it was a very insecure situation. So what'd you do? He had to suck up to the king. You had to do things that maybe you didn't want to do,
Right.
but you felt you had to do. But remember, all of those energies that you used to do that is, to be a succulent was to put that energy in your psychic anatomy. And then let's just say you did go against the king and it cut off your head. Well, that's a psychic shock. And that psychic shock goes into the psychic anatomy and then to be relived as some kind of a neck problem in some future lifetime. And so we can also look at our lives, all the pains and aches and reactions that we have in our daily life today is part and parcel of these past life experiences being brought forward in some form into the idiom of today. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly the same experience we had in the past, but it is relatable, and it is what they call entangled into our psychic anatomy, and is expressing itself into the third dimension. Here is a very interesting little video we have. It's called, most popularly, Curlian photography.
That is interesting.
Yeah. Now, Curlian photography was accidentally discovered in Russia in I think, 1939. This phenomenon is generally called electrical coronal discharge. This is the aura that people see as psychic auras. This is what they're seeing. Now, what you're looking at right now is not visible light per se. It is generated not with a camera, but let's go to this image. This is how it's done from a schematic point of view. What you do is you put a high voltage, high frequency power supply onto the object, which is sitting on a photographic film, and then there's a glass insulator, and there's a metal conducting plate grounded. Now that energy goes back and forth, and you can see then you have the coronal discharge. Well, that's basically how he discovered this process.
That is just, again, the video version. I encourage you to go to the website thisweekinamerica.us, and you can pull up the video tab there, and you can pull up the YouTube channel that has all of this, because it really helps you fully understand what Thomas is talking about by being able to see it. So pick up with the commentary here.
Now, what you're seeing is not fourth dimensional vortexes. What you're seeing are the radiations of the combination of the atoms, and therefore combined into molecules that are regenerating these energy patterns within the structures. Now, what you're seeing is the electromagnetic radiations of those atomic structures, which are still basically in a third dimension. but we're just able to generate those images from uh, from the process. However, when you look at your own body is acting this way, and you actually have these radiations coming from the atomic structures in your body, the combinations. So you can see that everything is energy. Now, if you cut a part of that leaf off, let's go back to the leaf. If you cut off part of this leaf, just the top part,
Okay.
you will the actual emanations would be it would still be there. In other words, it's like amputees who feel like they've got their leg cut off, but they still feel their leg. They still
Yep.
feel the pain. They still say, "Well, I can feel my toes moving," when it's gone, but it's psychically still there. You see, the psychic anatomy has not severed it. It is the energies that are still there persisting, and for a while it will persist. And let's go back to this particular thing. This right here is not an organic thing. It's a piece of metal. Now, even a piece of metal has an aura. You see, that's a very interesting concept.
Yes.
So if we look at this is a little image which I kind of like, and it's like, well, this is what we think we are, and this is what we are. The lighted being is what we really truly are. Now, Plato talked about that in the Republic about Atlantis when he was talking about the true forms of life, and that this world is just an illusion or an image, shadow image of the true forms in the psychic anatomy. This is Plato talking, 500 BC, and he's also made, and I say that everybody should be seeing this little allegory called the cave. And it's a very, very wonderful state of concepts from Plato, that he talks about this idea of what we truly are, the true forms in their ideal state that are unseen in another dimension. Now, they were talking about this way back when, so it's nothing new. It's not a new concept. That's a great concept. And here is a schematic within one of the lesson books that Dr. Norman gave in 1956, where he's in a schematic form. Now, I don't want to really get into the minutia of this schematic. However, just to look at the top part, at the right place, the right top, where we talk about the cyclic nature of energy and lifetimes, you can see how we ourselves go through the life cycle of each lifetime, and we are oscillating in a circular manner where we are born into this world, and we go up to the cycle where we get older and older, and then we start going down the cycle where the energy is now dissipating on that cycle. But you can see over to the left that this cycle is repeated an infinite number of times. It's totally contained within itself. The information is contained within itself. Now, these beautiful higher worlds are part and parcel of the infinite as we explore our own evolutionary process and we come to learn about these higher worlds. Now, another thing too is that to examine the process of life, we can use the radio as an example or an analogy. Now, we can say the back end of the radio, which is, of course, unseen, we can call this our psychic self or our psychic anatomy. They are the tuners, the capacitors, the resistors,
Right.
transistors, and stuff, and these, we say, are the mechanisms of dynamic energy operating in the higher dimensions. They're unseen, to the physical eye. They're inside the box. The dials on the radio are the way we interpret the numerous broadcast stations or bands oscillating into our psychic body, where you have the various stations coming into the back end of the radio. Now, consciousness is attained through us tuning or turning the dial, which is our mind, and selecting certain energy or formations, which we call vortexes. And again, I explained why we call those vortexes. Now, we can say that the AM portion, or the amplitude modulation portion of the radio, is the conscious mind. And the FM, or the frequency modulation portion, is the attunement to the higher frequencies in the infinite. We decide we decide which one we're going to select. You go up and down the dial there. We can tune to 640, which is the low end, which is the lower astral worlds. We can selectively tune into those worlds, and it's not imagination. There's no such thing as imagination. In the infinite, we can never come in contact with any state of consciousness or see things or believe things that are not already in the infinite, and has been in the infinite, and has generated itself an infinite number of times. So we can never generate anything new that the infinite hasn't done an infinite number of ways and times. And so when we tune to these lower astral worlds, which are part of the infinite too, but in a very low frequency, we can tune into the hell worlds described by Dante's Inferno. Or we can tune to the high dial, high part of the dial, the 1400, and now we're talking where we're oscillating or tuning to the higher worlds. It is up to us.
It's interesting, and Tom, I'll tell you, we've got a couple minutes left in the program. I have no idea where the time has gone, and I hope you, if you're not watching the video, you have a chance to watch the video. And I love the analogy at the end, because that's sort of what ties everything together that we've been talking about. It's the perfect analogy for what the conversation has been today.
Yeah, what it really boils down to is we are a ball of energy in a sea of energy. And we are oscillating with this sea of energy according to our own selectivity and what we understand and how much wisdom we've gained and how much we want to participate in a more positive aspect with this great infinite intelligence.
All of this is available on Tom's website, the information. It's an excellent website. So much great information there. It's very simple, UnariansUnited.com. That's Unarians, UNARIANS, United.com. You can link onto it by going directly to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Past programs with Thomas, you'll be able to listen to on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And, of course, the video that I mentioned, the video really helps because we've got Tom and we're connecting via Skype, and he's able to capture the screen and show great visuals of what exactly it is he's talking about, and some excellent information on the program today. Thomas, as always, this is really fun. Always learn something, but the time goes by way too quickly. The energy has gone by way too quickly for the program here today. Thank you so much for being with us on the program. We'll hold the thought where you are. We'll keep remembering the radio analogy, and we will pick it up the next time. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Rick.
It is our pleasure. Once again, Thomas Miller, our guest. His website is UnariansUnited.com. Link on directly to his website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And we're back after these messages.